Welcome back, everyone. Today we will be going through chapter 15, so let's get into it. Following a restorative stop in Berrien, Elliot and Janet forded the Great Salt River, half a mile wide and 6 inches deep, a vast gray-brown ribbon spilling through the green countryside like somebody left a hose on somewhere. They passed a low, grassy hill on which an enormous white figure was etched. The grass and soil had been cleared away in lines so that the white, chalky substrate underneath showed through. It was a simple cartoon of a man holding a staff horizontally above his head. He was usually there or thereabouts. Sometimes he wandered, but he was there today. It was good to see him still at his post. They trotted through open country, following paths in the grass like an old carpet that had worn thin. They crossed sun-blessed fields with stone walls crisscrossing them, real classics, almost pristine. Every way you looked, the landscape of Fillory composed itself into even lines, ridge lines and tree lines, near, middle, and far distance, each one a shade paler than the last, gently sloping to the left and the right and the left. A long, heavy trance of cloud lay above the horizon, utterly still, its outline etched finely against the sky, like the silhouette of a breaking wave cut out of paper. "Look at it all," Janet said. "Just look at it. It's almost like the world isn't ending." Almost. Even now, it still felt unreal. With so much beauty everywhere, it was easy to forget that Fillory was a dying land. Maybe this was Fillory's hectic glow. Then they plunged out of the sunlight into the gloom of the darkling woods, where they'd appeared the very first time they came to Fillory. This was a more chaotic scene than the Queenswood. Not all the trees were sentient, and the ones that were tended to be loners, and not very civic-minded. They spent a morning looking for the exact spot on which they'd arrived. There was a clock tree there, they remembered, and a sort of a gully, and there would have been a nice circulatory to it. Circularity to it, paying their respects to where it had all started. But they argued about where it was, and in the end it turned out that neither of them was right, by which time they were both in bad moods. They couldn't even find the 2 Moons Inn, where they'd kind of hoped to stop for some lunch and a beer. The next morning, they broke out of the woods again and into the Clock Barrens, which turned out to be a vast, flat plain sparsely covered with tiny, twisted scrub trees, the tallest of them only waist high. It was a bonsai forest. The barrens began more or less abruptly, as things tended to in Fillory. It was one of the peculiarities of Fillory that it bore an uncanny resemblance to a map of itself. Elliot had never seen the Clock Barrens before. There had never been any particular reason to go here, and he guessed he'd just never gotten around to it. Good to check that box before it was too late. "So, that's it," he said. Words failed him. They sometimes did. Elliot wondered if he was seeing it for the last time as well as the first, and what else he hadn't seen, and wouldn't ever see. "I thought it would be," Janet said, "I don't know, clockier." She pointed at one of the stunted trees with a headless axe. "Me too." "Maybe it is, and we're just looking at it wrong. Maybe from overhead it looks like a giant clock or something." "It so does not look like a giant clock from overhead." There were no paths, but they didn't especially need any. The little scrub trees were far enough apart that the horses could walk between them. Elliot had to fight a feeling of panic and urgent need for decisive action. This was day 6 of Janet's timeline, and even though she'd made it up on the spur of the moment, it had taken on an authoritative feel. They had a lead, a slim one, but it was a stretch to call it an adventure. It wasn't much to hang on a quest. They were trotting along in search of that they didn't even really know what. And there was no way to speed up the process, if there even was a process. It was quixotic, was what it was. Not even that, it was sub-quixotic. My kingdom for a windmill to tilt at. I had an idea last night, Janet said, for saving the world. I woke up with it in the middle of the night, but then forgot all about it till now. Are you ready? Ready. We hunt the white stag, like Quentin did. We catch it or shoot it or whatever you do with it. We get 3 wishes. We wish Fillory would last forever and not die. Done. Mischief managed. Elliot was silent. You have to admit, no, it's good, he said. It's definitely good. You think the stag could do that? No idea, but it's worth a try, right? Definitely worth a try. Agreed. If this quest is a bust, we'll do that. Plus, we'd still have 2 wishes left over after we save the world, Janet said. 1 each. What else would you wish for? Feel like I should wish for Quentin back. Janet laughed. Then I could use my wish to wish him away again. Psych. They slept that night in the barrens. They had to burn flat a circle of ground to make room for their tent. The trees were surprisingly fireproof. The wood was fantastically hard and dense, but when they caught, they burned like rocket fuel, hot on their faces, sending sparks and spears of light up into the night sky and leaving fountainous after images on their vision. It made for a July 4th atmosphere, a summer carnival in a wasteland, and they broke out the last of the wine. After a couple of bottles, Janet suggested they start a huge forest fire because it would look cool. Elliot thought it would be more prudent not to, but he agreed that if he couldn't save the world, they might as well come back here and burn the clock barons before the end. By mid-morning the next day, day 7, they could see where they were going, a single clump of trees sticking up out of the horizon. Regular size, non-bonsai ones. As they got closer, they saw that the trees stood in a circle, a thin ring 1 tree deep, and that there was a house in the middle. Baron or barons? Janet said. Can you have just 1 baron or multiple barons? Baronesses? Hush, this is it. They drew up 100 yards from the ring. They were all clock trees, every one. It was a strange and beautiful tableau. Elliot had never seen more than 1 full-grown clock tree at a time. Quentin used to joke that there was probably only 1 clock tree in Fillory. It just moved very fast when they weren't looking. But here were 12 of them, in all different kinds. There was a gnarled oak, a slender birch with a rectangular dial, a needle straight spine, a melted-looking, morbidly obese baobab. The house in the middle was perfectly square with a steeply pitched shingled roof. It was made of a pale stone that looked like it had been brought from a long way off. Very Hansel and Gretel, Janet said. It's not like it's a candy house. You know what I mean. He didn't, actually. There was a fairy tale feel to it all. He did, actually. There was a fairy tale feel to it all. Nobody answered when they knocked, so they walked around to the back, where they found an old woman on her knees working in a vegetable garden. The resident witch, obviously. Her hair was gray but pulled back in a girlish ponytail. A small woman. She wore a long brown dress, coarse and practical. When she stood up to greet them, her face was pleasant and peaceful, though there was something mischievous in it, too. Greetings, she said, to the High King of Fillory, and to Queen Janet, of course. Hi, Elliot said. Sorry to drop in like this. Not at all. I knew you were coming. She crouched down again and went back to what she was doing, which was fixing a little wicker cloche that stood over some sweet peas. I figured you wouldn't try to be stealthy when you lit those trees on fire. Are you wondering how I know your names? Because we're famous, Janet said. Because we're the king and queen of you? I know your names, the woman said, because I'm a witch. I'm a bit famous too. Jane Chatwin. Or, as I used to be known, the Watcher Woman. Jane Chatwin? Elliot said. He felt something very close to awe. Well, we meet at last. She was right. She was famous. She was one of the first children to come to Fillory decades ago, and she had haunted it for decades as the mysterious Watcher Woman. It was she who, with the help of a magic watch that controlled time, helped orchestrate their journey to Fillory in the first place, and their disastrous confrontation with the beast, who had once been her brother, Martin Chatwin. Or are you still the Watcher Woman? What shall we call you? Oh, Jane is fine. I haven't been the Watcher Woman for years now. Somehow I thought you'd be hotter, Janet said. You've been talking to Quentin. Why don't you come inside? We'll have some tea. The cottage was well kept, neat as a pin and swept to within an inch of its life. The decor was a crude Fillorian approximation of the interwar English drawing rooms that Jane must have remembered from her childhood. Funny that for all the effort she'd put into escaping the real world, she'd wound up recreating it here. She summoned a blue bloom of fire out of her stove and placed a tea kettle on it. Hard to say where she got a natural gas hookup out here. One can boil the water with magic, she said, but it never tastes quite the same. While they waited, they sat around a sunny yellow wooden table with a water glass full of wild flowers on it. Now that they were here, Elliot thought he'd wait a bit before he popped the big question. How long have you been living here? He asked. We didn't even know you were still in Fillory. Oh, I never left. I've been here for years. Ever since the business with you and Quentin and Martin. Since I broke my watch. I've always wondered about that, Janet said. Is it really gone? It's gone. There's nothing left. I broke it and jumped on the pieces. Darn. Elliot hadn't thought of that. It might have been handy if they could have put it back together. Though he wasn't sure what they would go back and do differently. Maybe they could just relive the same couple of years forever. Was that how it worked? It was confusing and irrelevant now. Not that I don't miss it, Jane said. As it turned out, it was all that was keeping me young. When I broke it, I went from 25 to 75 overnight, or thereabouts. With all that back and forthing, I'd lost track of how old I really was. Now I know. She looked down at the backs of her hands, which were ropey and mottled. I wish the dwarves had warned me. They must have known. I'm sorry, Elliot said. He tasted his tea. It was bitter, and it tingled on his lips. Fillory owes you a debt. We all owe each other debts. I always thought you must hate me for the way I used you. Janet shrugged. You did what you had to do. It's not like you got off easy. Your brother's dead. And without you, we never would have found our way to Fillory at all. Call it a wash. Though I did wonder what happened to you. What the hell are you doing all the way out here? I study with the dwarves now. They're teaching me clockwork. I didn't know there were any dwarves out here, Elliot said. I thought they only lived in the mountains. There are dwarves everywhere. They're like ants. For every one you see, there's 50 more you don't. These ones are underground. She tapped her foot on the floor. There's tunnels all the way under the barrens. You're sitting over one of the entrances. Huh. Janet had the wrong fairy tale. She should have said Snow White. He suppressed an urge to look under his chair. It made him a bit uncomfortable to think that Fillory might be riddled with dwarf tunnels. They'd never done anybody any harm yet, but Jesus, they were like termites. Though it did explain who'd run a gas line into her cottage. There's an entire city down there. I would show you, but the dwarves are touchy about their secrets. They're terribly polite, but they'd find some reason not to let you in. How come they let you in? Janet said. I've paid my dues. Plus, I did them a few favors. Like what? Like saving Fillory. There was a funny kind of competitiveness in the room, a rivalry. The first generation of Fillorian royalty versus the second. Jane Chatwin didn't seem especially fazed by Janet's bluntness. On the evidence, it was hard to imagine Jane Chatwin being fazed by anything. We saved Fillory, Janet said. Twice, Elliot said. But who's counting? It's a start, Jane said. When they'd finished their tea, she showed them into the next room, which had a pleasant smell of very pure mineral oil and raw-cut metal. The walls were studded with books, and on each hook hung a pocket watch. There were brass watches, steel watches, silver and gold and platinum watches. They had white faces with black numbers, and black faces with white numbers, and clear crystal faces that showed the movements behind them. Some just told the time. Some were crowded with tiny subdials that displayed the temperature and the season and the positions of celestial bodies. Some of them were as fat as softballs. Some of them were the size of cufflinks. Did you really make all these? Janet said. They're awesome. You could tell she really thought they were. Elliot also got the impression Janet wanted one, but wasn't quite up to asking. Most of them, Jane Chatwin said. It keeps me out of trouble. Oh my God, Janet said. You're trying to rebuild the watch, aren't you? The time travel one, aren't you? You're going to reverse engineer it or whatever. Jane shook her head solemnly. Oh, well, I wish you would. If they don't control time, what do? Elliot asked. They tell time, Janet said. That's enough. When the tour was over, they went back outside and admired the garden again. Behind it, rusted and half drowned in grass, were the broken remains of what Elliot took to be the Watcherwoman's famous Ormolu clock carriage, run down at last. He wanted to ask about it, but he sensed that from Jane's point of view the visit was coming to an end, and he wasn't leaving without what he came for. What are the dwarves doing all the way out here anyway? Janet asked. Why build a bunch of tunnels in the middle of nowhere? Or under the middle of nowhere? I'll show you. Jane took a spade that was leaning against the house and stuck it into the ground with a coarse chuff. When she turned over the shovelful, there were glints of something in it. Didn't you ever wonder why it was called the Clock Barrens? I guess I did. Jane bent down with a groan and picked a couple of shiny things out of the soil, 3 or 4 of them, and held them out. In the palm of her hand lay 2 tiny perfect gears, a brass wheel as thin as paper, and a delicate coiled mainspring. Clockwork, she said. It's naturally occurring here. You should see the big stuff they mine deep down. You could make Big Ben out of it. I'm not entirely sure that they didn't. She flung them away into the grass. Elliot had to suppress an urge to go after them. This kind of thing, totally inexplicable, random strangeness like this, made him want to save Fillory more than ever. Plus, they liked the dwarfness of the trees. She added. Jane, Elliot said, we came here for a reason. Ember says that Fillory is dying. The end of the world is coming. She nodded, but didn't answer at first. The setting sun caught the bezel of a clock tree and flashed off it, orange light on silver. I suspected something like that, she said. Did you notice the clocks? They don't agree anymore. They used to keep perfect time, but now look at them. Their hands are going everywhere. It's like they're panicking, little idiots. She frowned at the fairy ring of clock trees, like they were disobedient children. She supposed they were all the children she had, or would have. What do you think it means? Hard to say. Lost in thought, for a moment she looked young and beautiful and intensely curious, the way she must have looked to Quentin when she first recruited him back in Brooklyn, dressed as a paramedic all those years ago. You know, these were the last clock trees I ever made. I always thought I'd think of a better name for them. Their roots go very deep into Fillory, not all the way through to the far side. I don't think they've made it that far, but more than halfway. They're like a nervous system, very quick to register systematic change. They're useful that way. But they shouldn't be able to disagree with each other. It shouldn't be possible. They're all one big tree below the surface. They reach out for each other and grow together at its roots. The dwarfs hack through them sometimes, but they grow back fast. Except that this time they haven't. Deep underground, something must be tearing them apart, tearing Fillory apart. Jane walked over to one of the trees, the smallest one, knobby and broken-backed like an olive tree. It was bent over so far she'd had to prop it up with a board. She knocked twice on the crystal face of its clock. It was on a section of trunk that ran parallel to the ground, and its face looked up at the sky. It swung open, first the glass, then the dial, to reveal the works inside, gears and catchments turning and meshing silently. She bit her lip. "What should we do?" Elliot said. "Damned if I know." She slammed the clock face shut like it was the door of a washing machine. "Listen, Elliot." "Your Highness," Janet prompted. She felt free to disrespect Elliot, very free in fact, but she didn't like other people doing it. Jane ignored her. "Look at me. This is what an ended story looks like. I was giving my life for this country, this world, before you were born. Everyone I've ever loved is dead. I had my own brother killed. I have no partner, no children. I've done my great deed, and it took everything I had. I won't be dragged back into another adventure. I've made a separate peace." "Well, and we would rather not drag you," Janet said. "But see, apocalypse. Has it occurred to you that you might just accept it?" She was a small woman, but she drew herself up, and there was some Edwardian dignity in her manner. Has it crossed your minds that you don't have to go off on a holy crusade every time things don't go your way? You children and your adventures. Stories have ends. Why don't you let Fillory die gracefully, in its own time and its own way? Maybe it wants to let go. I was never a real paramedic, but a phrase comes back to me. Do not resuscitate. Let it go. Let Fillory die in peace. "No. We're not asking you to come with us," Elliot said. "Just tell us what you know. There has to be something, please." The High King of Fillory went down on one knee before the Watcher woman. "Please. Our stories haven't ended yet. Yours may have, but ours haven't. If it's time, then it's time, but I am not the last High King of Fillory. I don't believe it. This land isn't ready to die." Jane stared at him for a long time. Then she made a disgusted noise in her throat and turned away and boosted herself up onto the bent trunk of the clock tree. "All right," she said. "All right. I'll tell you what I know, but it isn't much. I feel like I know less and less every day. Maybe it's the time travel. Some days I wonder if I'm starting to live backward, like Merlin. God, I think I would kill myself. Or would I already have killed myself? My brother could have helped you, but he's dead long ago. What, Martin? Not likely. Not him, the other one, Rupert. He spent a lot of time in Fillory. He was close to Martin. That's not actually a huge plus in our book, Janet said. It should be. Martin was an asshole, but he was smart. He found out things about Fillory that you and I will never know, and he was only 13 when he did it. Have you ever wondered where he got all that power from? How he became what he was? I guess I have wondered that, Elliot said. I have too. I never knew, but I think Rupert did. He was with Martin the day he disappeared. He always said he didn't see anything, but I think he did. He was an open book, but our Rupes, but no good at keeping secrets, though he thought he was. If I were looking for missing puzzle pieces, I would start there. Go back to Earth, find his things, see what he left behind. Maybe he wrote something down, and I think he nicked something. You weren't supposed to bring things through from Fillory back to Earth, or not big things anyway. But I think Rupert did. I think he stole something. At any rate, when he left here, there was a big stink about it. No one ever pinned it on him. And by then, Martin was raising hell, so it rather got lost in the shuffle. But I think he had something he wasn't supposed to. That's what I would do. Go back, all the way back, to where this whole disaster started. You weren't there, and even I wasn't there. But Rupert was. That was all they got out of her. Elliot asked her some polite questions about the garden, while Janet walked from clock tree to clock tree, knocking on the faces, trying to get them to open for her the way they did for Jane. Jane claimed not to know why they didn't. After 10 more minutes, Elliot said they should be on their way, and Jane didn't disagree. She walked them to their horses. They hadn't wanted to come inside the ring of the clock trees. Good luck, the watcherwoman said. And I do mean that. Thanks, Elliot said. Good luck with your clockwork lessons. Thank you. I bet you wish you hadn't broken that watch, Janet said. She wouldn't leave it alone. Wishes are for children, Jane Chatwin said. I grew up. That's it for this week. We'll see you next week with Chapter 16.